So good afternoon. Thank you guys for joining me. I'm really excited to spend slightly less than the next hour nerding out with you about that which I am most passionate about, which is education. So welcome to The Kids Aren't All Right, Security and K-12 Education in America. So, me. When I first got interested in security, I was really far on the other side of the divide from this community. I was a high school English teacher. Since then, I've gotten more degrees, which is a mistake. Don't do it. I've been an education researcher, a new teacher coach. I did program management for an ed tech company who has sadly been in the news a lot for a breach lately, trying to poach all my former colleagues to where I am now. And now I'm the director of digital safety for a charter school network that's based in the SF Bay area. If you recognize the name Summit Public Schools, it's because people have a lot of opinions about the fact that we're partnered with Mark Zuckerberg. So if you recognize that and you're like, oh, why do I remember having a funny feeling about that thing? That's why. So my job is still, despite the name, more heavily slanted toward education than security. I'm leading up initiatives to better educate our faculty and students on security is kind of my main thing. As long as I can remember, I've really enjoyed taking things apart, seeing what's inside of them and attempting to put them back together again, or just doing whatever I feel like with the remaining pieces. This has not yet proved valuable in my career because dismantling students is generally frowned upon. So this talk, this is me addressing you from the other side of the aisle. This is the talking about the humans and the humans that don't even know what security is about. This is not a hard code talk. There will unfortunately be no code samples. I'm really bad at keyboard shortcuts. And there will be no windows minimized, maximized, or moved around. And because I am a teacher first and foremost, there will be homework at the end. And gifts. There will be many gifts. So why care? Whether you have kids or not, whether you're planning on ever having kids or not, and whether you just want to watch the world burn or not, this is still relevant to you, like right now in this moment, because the pipeline problem is an ubiquitous issue across tech, but especially in security. So if you're concerned about the future, or even the right now, of your team and or your career, this is something that's worth knowing about. And also, if you just have a soft heart and you are concerned about young people, this is also a good place to be. This is how I feel most days. So this is audience participation time. I have 2 questions for you guys. And I want to honestly know, just go ahead, just get a couple people to shout out. What does it really mean to you when you think of what is a responsible user of the internet? What should they know? What skills should they have? This could be anything from like they don't have an egg avatar on Twitter, to they have never read R, the Red Pill, to like they know how to vet sources. It could be anything. What makes someone, yeah. Yes, that's a very good one. Anything else, if you think about it? Yes, also a very good one. Only click the expected emails and only click the links you know. Yes, and definitely don't forward them. Absolutely, it is definitely, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. I'm repeating these for anyone that can't hear, by the way. So then, part 2, thinking about what you want, like what you see as a general other people online, what makes them responsible users. When you think about in your corporate environment, what is the minimum viable product of skills that all users should have? I think there's a big overlap, like definitely don't click that email, don't click that link. What else do we really want just to be able to do, like, be a secretary? What do you want the person at the front desk of your company to be able to do? I just want one. Yeah, be able to get online by themselves. That is a great place to start. And, like, that is not actually that. Like, that's not, we think that's a low bar, but it's not a low bar. Yes, absolutely. Like, that is 100% the ability that if they want to do something simple, like change the font size, change the color, can they solve that problem on their own? So this is where students come in. Now that we know what we want in our users, let's think about these kiddos that are the future users, currently hurtling through the school system towards your unsuspecting network. I'm not saying every kid should be a hacker. Like, that would be fun, but also, oh my god, chaos. Also, a little bit saddening to my tender English major feelings, but the internet is and ought to be considered a human right. We can all agree that access to and ability to use the internet is a basic need in today's society. Like, try to get a job, any job, without touching the internet. It's really hard. So this stat, 80% of middle skill jobs require tech skills. And middle skill jobs are classified as jobs that require less than a bachelor's degree. So that could be just a high school diploma or a 2-year associate's degree. That's not a really high bar, but we're looking at 80% of them requiring basic computer literacy. This is my personal list of what a dream user would be as I think about how I'm educating my colleagues at Summit. I want them to be able to understand and use strong password hygiene. I don't want to see Post-it notes. I'm really big evangelist for password hygiene and multi-factor authentication everywhere that it's possible. But in a professional space, I'm also really aggressive about boundaries and protocols. So while all of these are difficult, it's that final item, uses critical thinking, that's the hardest to find. That goes back to that idea of, can you change the font size without calling IT? This isn't an insult to my users, because remember, I work at a school district, and we're kind of obsessed with critical thinking in the education space. I'm fortunate to work with some amazingly brilliant people. They just don't have a tech framework when it comes to critical thinking. No one ever offered it to them, and it's a very difficult thing to create if you have nothing to base it on. They're hardly alone. So the real users, when we think back to our minimum viable product, at least 58% of millennials, that is my generation, have low problem-solving skills using technology, and 91% of them don't believe that there's anything that they don't know. So to quote the always articulate Rumsfeld, there are unknown unknowns, the things we don't know that we don't know. And that's what many of our users, we're talking about 9 out of 10 of millennials, don't even realize that they might be struggling. This is not about bashing millennials, by the way. I selected the data on millennials just because they're the ones who are currently in the workplace, who have been through this most recent iteration of our education system, and also who are predominantly in charge of the education of this next wave of users. So this isn't about like, oh my god, millennials. This is about, this is where we're going. This is our trend. So there was that quote on the last slide about problematic levels. What does that mean? So the Program for International Assessment of Adult Competencies is an international survey that assesses people all over the world on a number of different measures. It is something that comes up a lot in education discussions because that's where we get those numbers about things like, hey, our kids are bad at math. And they measure tech skills from the scale of below level 1 through to level 3. Level 2, they have evaluated as being the minimum standard skill level to access both the professional and social benefits of technology. So basically the ability to use tech meaningfully in your life. Level 1 means someone is unable to solve a problem whose solution takes a couple steps and requires more than one computer application. So as it says on the slide, the example is, They might have trouble locating specific information on a spreadsheet and then emailing that information to someone. That's a lot of phone calls to IT that you don't want to deal with. Or a lot of people unable to do their jobs. Below level 1 would have difficulty doing things like sorting emails into folders. I always like to have a small moment of silence for those who are below level 1. 19% of millennials score below level 1. That's like 1 in 5. No, that's not 1 in 5. That's 20%. Whatever. 19, I'm English major, not math, damn it. So 19% of millennials score below level 1, and 78% of them don't see their skill level as lacking. Like, of those 19%, almost 80% of them don't think that they're missing out. You have probably experienced these frustrations in the workplace. This is my favorite GIF. That poor hedgehog. So the heart of it is that there's a misconception in our society that just because you use some sort of technology that you know what you're doing. So doing something like browsing Facebook on your smartphone or shopping on Amazon is the same thing as knowing how to use technology in the workplace. That is not true. Moore's law keeps proving itself again and again, and in parallel versions of assorted technologies. The rate at which it's growing and being infused into every aspect of our lives can be daunting. Think about where we were just in 2000, where we are now technologically. For pretty much everyone in this room, it's your job to keep up with this, but if it isn't, that's crazy. Because it is so omnipresent and also so daunting, it's just sort of assumed, okay, kids are going to pick it up through like osmosis or something, whatever. They're constantly touching smartphones. They know about how to do this stuff. Few, if any, schools continue to teach basic computer literacy skills, because after all, the kids just know. I would, however, not having had the funding to research this, I'm going to caveat that this is purely a hypothesis. I suspect that there's an element of being daunted at how quickly technological progress is going to render whatever curriculum you make obsolete. Like, I could make curriculum right now. I actually am making curriculum right now, and it's going to be obsolete by the time the school year starts. I'm going to have to make changes at the beginning of the school year in September. So it's intimidating keeping up with everything that could be asked of a teacher tasked with such a class. So regardless of what kids are learning or not learning naturally, we know that time spent interfacing with a device is not the same as problem solving or understanding how to actually engage with the device or the internet. Just think of the difference between a smartphone and a desktop computer, or even a laptop. And for a gross majority of students in our country, a smartphone is the only way that they will connect to the internet until they get to college. They might not use a QWERTY keyboard, ever, until they get to college. Yeah. So, some school districts do require something like that. Some don't. Some offer it as an elective. Some don't offer it at all. All of this tying back to the question of, can you find someone to teach it? And, should have gotten water. Can you find someone to teach it? And do you have the actual devices? When I was teaching, my school was about 20,000, it was 2,000 students. We had 60 computers. So getting an opportunity to get those kids into in front of a keyboard was really hard. Oh my goodness, thank you so much. So when you think about the difference between like just a smartphone and a computer, there's the QWERTY keyboard, which yes, they're used to seeing on the screen, but they're used to navigating it very differently. And they're used to touch screens. Like, put your kid in front of a mouse for the first time if all they've ever used is a phone, and there's going to be some issues there. So all of that is why you drink. Your users are arriving in your workplace with incredibly basic skills. They've scraped by, and they're going to keep scraping by in your office and on your network. And there's always going to be the person who likes to tell me, well, I didn't have any of those things when I was growing up. I taught myself to code, and now I make like $1 billion in Silicon Valley, and so I don't know why everyone else can't do that. Hashtag bootstraps. Look, that's great. That's super great. I'm very happy for you, but that's not going to be everyone, and it shouldn't need to be everyone. If something is a cornerstone of how our society functions, we can't expect everyone to go out there and develop a passion for it. What everyone does need to be able to do is think outside the policy. We're going to come back to that idea really soon, because I'm a big supporter of policies. I write a lot of them on my job, and I do think that they are really essential to having your workplace run effectively, but that when executed poorly and without proper user education, they cause serious problems. So, what are kids learning in school? Not much when it comes to computers. Computer science courses and enrollment have declined over the last few decades. At the same time, the sum total hours of instruction in schools has increased. So students who graduated in 2009 received roughly 420 more hours of classroom time than students who graduated in 1990. What fills that time? Possibly bees, but it's definitely not computers. So, if we look at this, we can see that over a 19-year period, high school students enrolling in computer science courses declined from 25% to 19%. That is a significant drop, both in the vernacular and in the statistical sense. On the other hand, every other domain showed increases, and that includes things like calculus and physics for those who want to play the kids are lazy and scared of challenges and math canard. Part of the issue is this: out of over 42,000 high schools in the United States, in 2011, only 2,000 were certified to offer AP Computer Science. So even if students wanted to take a CS course, there's a good chance that they simply couldn't. And I could get off on a whole tangent here about recruiting and retaining teachers who are qualified to teach CS, but that's kind of beside the point. It's not at all unusual for schools to inform another teacher, usually a math teacher, that they're going to teach CS next year. Surprise! I have a credential in teaching English. That's required for me to be able to be an English teacher. However, there is, in no state is there a credential for computers. So that's why they usually grab math, because they're like, hey, you like formulas. Go do this thing. None of that is ideal. However, there's a clear lack of willingness on behalf of schools to commit to teaching CS if they're unwilling to at least take the steps of offering the course. Charts don't lie. Look at calculus. It's just like, whee! Here we go! And computer science is just down there. The little sad yellow line that couldn't. So it's obvious that given the opportunity and the offering to take these more rigorous and engaging and challenging courses, students are doing it. They're rising to the occasion. And this is kind of going back to my whole, like, making fun of the person that taught themselves to code. Like, yeah, not every student needs to be a coder, so why am I making such a big deal about CS class? Well, if they aren't taking CS class, what are they learning and how are they learning it? As of 2012, 62% of teachers identified themselves as having a lack of comfort with technology, and that lack of comfort prevented them from bringing technology into their classroom. And to be honest, I was a classroom teacher during that very year, and I can't believe that statistic is so good. Only 62%. Are you kidding? That's almost 40% of teachers feel comfortable. That is amazing. I spent a lot of time being informal tech support, and technology is daunting when that is not at all your expertise. Teachers are experts in their subject matter. They're experts in the art of pedagogy. These are things that take up huge amounts of intellectual and emotional bandwidth. They're rarely experts in technology unless they just happen to have a personal interest in the subject. Therefore, you have a low quantity of teachers that are focused on using technology. Very few teacher credentialing programs require that teachers going through their training develop any sort of competence in technology. In my teacher credentialing program, we did a fun, half-credit class where we got to look up instructional websites and put them into a PowerPoint that we could theoretically share with students. That was my technology training. Few districts offer professional development in technology skills, and this is kind of a big deal, because think about it. Well, the average office worker over the last, let's say, 20 years has been slowly adjusting to the use of technology because they use it every day. You have a computer, IT comes in and patches it, eventually they upgrade it. You are constantly learning new things, you're using the internet daily. All of these things, even if you're learning them poorly, you are learning them because you're doing them. For many teachers, that's barely registered. You don't ever need to use technology as a teacher. It is entirely optional. Doing something like bringing technology into the classroom is really risky. First off, you don't want to feel like an idiot in front of a classroom of 35 kids. It's not fun. However, if your entire lesson is dependent on using technology and it doesn't work, what do? I had a very harrowing experience. I was being observed by a flock of visiting superintendents from around Northern California. And I was trying to use my new smartboard in my classroom. The Wi-Fi kept going down. My computer kept doing wonky things. Thank God my students found this sympathetic. This was a class that normally would have been like sharks smelling blood. I don't know what happened. I don't know why they were so nice. But it was a debacle. And I've got these people in suits in the back of the room, evaluating me. So I don't blame teachers for their hesitance to bring in technology. At the same time, that hesitance is absolutely hurting their students. So, excuse me, I have something in my throat and it just will not go away. So, where technology is present, because it is making its way into the schools now, where it's present, it's passive and non-engaging. Everyone now has Google Apps for Education because it's free, so yay, now you can get emails from your teacher. Lots of people use Remind, which is yay, now you can get text messages from your teacher. There's an online grade book, things like that. So students aren't learning to be tech savvy because it's the same as anything else. They're going and they're looking at something. They aren't actually engaging, solving problems, etc. Then there's the few, the majestic, the brave teachers who go out there looking for technology. But who's got the money? So what they do is they find free apps that they can give to their students. They go looking through and they find whatever on the internet has a price tag of 0. So obviously this means the students are now the product. And we have a whole fresh new mess there of students becoming inured to the constant barrage of ads, data mining, and insecure features. They just don't learn about things like privacy settings and how to control what you're putting on the internet, because the teacher isn't thinking about this and aware of this. And because they're just using all of the free apps, you get used to, oh yeah, no, I mean, part of being able to take notes in school is just that you constantly have ads for Viagra. That's like a thing. Doesn't everyone have that? So teachers who mean well and are certainly better than doing nothing, they're nonetheless causing a lot of harm by selecting these free apps. So going back to the question about our kids learning keyboarding and things like that, only 7 out of 50 states have an explicit expectation that by the time students graduate high school, they will have obtained basic technology skills. This was a really unpleasant, like, reading through educational codes of states. And so many of them are just like, it is assumed that students will have used technology in school. But there's no actual, like, are they going to demonstrate it in any way? Like, where is this guaranteed? Because it's just saying it's assumed that some of their core courses will touch on it, which again is ridiculous. The rest require 1 credit or more, however, whatever, of some sort of elective to graduate. And for some bizarre reason, this is always structured as you can either take a fine or performing art, or you can learn about computers. Because these are 2 very divergent things, obviously, and we cannot let them ever intersect. It's a really frustrating division for me. So, if students don't have any formal instruction, if they don't have CS classes, if they don't have basic classes, and if the teachers are like, dear God, computers, then how are they learning about technology? And a lot of what they learn, if they even bother to read their acceptable use policy, is going to come from their acceptable use policy. So it determines how students interact with technology. I did a survey of roughly a dozen districts in the Silicon Valley / San Francisco Bay Area, partially because that's where I'm based, so I'm biased, and partially because I figure that if we can't get tech right in the heart of Techlandia, then we're probably pretty fucked everywhere else. So it's not hugely surprising that every AUP includes a clause stating that students have 0 expectation of privacy. That's pretty much your standard, like, corporate AUP. We all sign that shit. We're used to it. However, the thing that really gets me is that all of these student files can be subject to search without notice and without cause. That's the part that really bugs me, is like, okay, you can search them, but what are we teaching our kids about their right to privacy and their right to, like, their own independence and self-determination if we can just go ahead and go into whatever without even telling them? Yes. Yes, and that is a thing. I'm currently revising the use policy for my district, and it's something I've been really struggling with on exactly that, because we run a one-to-one Chromebook program, so all of our students are issued devices. And for a lot of them, this is the first time that they've ever had something that is theirs as far as technology, other than maybe like a cell phone. And I want them to feel this sense of ownership, and I want them to know that they can do what they want with this device outside of school. The issue is where we get into this question of legality and use policies, in that I want them to know, like, okay, on your school Google Apps for Education account, we can see everything that you do with your email and your docs and everything. So make a personal account. But then it comes up to, well, it's still on a device that's owned by us, and I don't want to encourage them to think of something issued by, say, a corporate employer as something that they can use for personal reasons. But also, I want these kids to have ownership of coming into their technological own. So use policies are really tricky at this age. But all I know is that I am not at all a fan of this idea that everything can be searched without notice and without cause. It's especially the without notice that bothers me. I think all students should know if they're being monitored. And students and their parents must agree to these policies in order to use any sort of technology in school. So, the theme of all use policies is the nope bus. They're completely focused on the things you can't do. This is a list. My personal favorite is the fact that the Palo Alto Unified School District has a specific clause about how you can't play World of Warcraft at school. And I know there's a story there. Like, I just know it. Yeah. Many of them ban posting anonymously, which I'm like, how do you ban that? They're doing it anonymously. And then the one that I have the most questions about is the charging devices at school. Like, why are you banning that? Update your wiring. I feel like that's just one of those things that it's in there, it's almost never enforced, but they're like, you know, wouldn't it be great that when some kid is being a little shit and aggravates us, we have a way to send them to the principal's office? Like, that's what that says to me. Like, what are we trying to teach them by saying you can't charge your phone at school? So the idea is ultimately that AUPs are focused on controlling student behavior and assuming the worst. The assumption is that given any sort of freedom, students will behave badly, and more than likely it will involve boobs. AUPs are codes of conduct, not documents designed to improve safety or security. If you're lucky, there will be a few items about, like, don't talk to strangers, don't meet anyone that you talk to online, but that's it. It basically boils down to stay away from pedo bear. I blame this on the Puritans. Thinking back to that fun participation bit at the beginning and what you wish your dream user knew, parents aren't worried about that. Parents are worried about their kids seeing porn, or perhaps sexting porn, or perhaps accidentally becoming porn on chat roulette or something. In contrast, child identity theft is way on the rise. All those free apps and those poorly secured edtech apps, they're chock full of student data. And that information is solid gold, especially if you can get that juicy PII, especially if you can get some social security numbers. Kids don't have a credit history. There's a really alarming rise in kids doing things like getting to college and trying to rent their first off-campus apartment and finding out they're bankrupt. It's kind of a new thing. And it's been going up by approximately 10% a year. And the terrible thing is, since kids don't have a credit report, parents can't freeze the kid's credit. Like, you cannot freeze someone's credit until they have a credit report. So the interesting thing is, some particularly tech-savvy parents are opening credit cards for their infants and then putting a freeze on their child's credit, like when the kid is born. But, like, it's kind of crazy that we have to do that. It's awesome that there's parents that have figured that out, but that's, you know, what, like 1% of really crazy paranoid parents that are, you know, at DEF CON every year being like, someone's watching my baby. I have stickers on all my cell phones because people love babies. And that's the problem, is that every other parent who's just like, oh my god, my baby's so cute, I'm gonna take pictures and post them on Instagram. Like, they don't know about this shit. So then there's identity theft, which is obviously, like, incredibly insidious and damaging. But there's also lots of other things on student information systems. Whether or not a student has a learning disability, if they have health complications, if they're on any sort of medications, In some cases, there might be notes about religious affiliation, particularly, you know, we had flags like that for students who were Muslim and needed to have time to go pray during the day. That was noted in our student information system. Disciplinary record. We've got like most of a kid's life. By the time they graduate college, we know everything they've ever done. We don't want that following them. We had notes about students' immigration status so that we knew how to interact with their family, how to interact with them, and what kind of things that we might need to do to help support them. Obviously, we're collecting this information to do good things, but every bit of information that we collect is very dangerous, particularly things like religious and immigration status right now in this current administration. The Puritans gave us a country full of people afraid of sexuality. The result is that we have schools that are more afraid of students and sex than they are of students and data security. And also that that's what our parents are more afraid of. And so it's a question of what are we doing for this? I want to take a quick moment just to let you guys look at some of these amazing quotes from the acceptable use policies. That second one is my absolute favorite because what the fuck does that mean? Harmful matter includes matter taken as a whole, which to the average person applying contemporary statewide standards appeals to the prurient interest, and is matter which depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct and which lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors. Like, what? Yeah! What? And then also, material placed on student web pages are expected to meet academic standards of proper spelling and grammar. You had to put this in your use policy? Like, you're gonna expel someone because they used your instead of your. So then there's these. If a student sees something naughty, they need to tell an adult. However, the adults aren't totally responsible for what students do because they try really hard to micromanage everyone, but they just can't be everywhere at once. And remember, never share your passwords unless an adult at school asks you. Yep. Yeah, I'm currently engaged in a very bloody fight at work right now about removing that from our use policy because I'm like, there's literally never a reason. We don't need that. There's no acceptable reason to have this there. This is just what I think when I'm reading use policies. I love the one in the back. I love this gift so much. All right, so this is where the majestic Thunderous Silence comes in. I could not find a single AUP that included anything about password policies other than users are responsible for their own passwords. So there's nothing about how to create a strong password or how to properly protect it. No expectation of password changes, including any policy around default passwords having to be changed after initial login. Some school districts do that, but it depends on what your tech team decides to do. Fortunately, my current district does that, but I speak from experience because even though I haven't worked for my previous school district where I was teaching, it's like 4 years now, I can totally still log into my email with the default password. None ever mention multi-factor authentication. There's nothing about how to protect your data, who you should be sharing your documents with, what is malware, what is phishing. There's nothing about suspicious emails anywhere. Nothing about using HTTPS, encryption. What is a safe Wi-Fi network to access? I don't know. I don't care. If you're not at school, no one gives a shit. Basically, the heart of the issue is that students have already learned that their learning is not viewed as being as important as covering the school's asses legally. The institution is valued well above the individual. I read about lots of restrictions around proxies, VPNs, VMs, etc. But no explanation about what any of this means. which means sometimes students are going to end up doing it accidentally because they're curious and they're smart. So this means that kids are going to get in trouble for doing things because they wanted to know something. They're also not going to learn how any of those tools can help or protect them. So instead, they're just taught, accept a lack of ownership over your life. Your data, your passwords, none of it is sacred to you. Computer security is not about protecting yourself, but about protecting your organization's legal acts. And at this point, you might be saying this to yourself. Because yeah, if you work in security, your job basically is covering your organization's legal ass. So you're like, duh, what are you saying here? Why is this relevant to me? Yeah, this isn't that different from workplaces. On the other hand, people can choose where they work, how they work, what they want to do with themselves. Students can't choose school. It's mandatory. And the way that they're being trained in school isn't preparing them to pull their weight when they do get to the point of working. Your job isn't to teach basic computer skills, or at least it shouldn't be. You can't focus on doing your job to the best of your ability if your users don't understand the basics of how to hold up their end of the deal. By failing our students, our schools are also failing you. So just like not every student needs to be a hacker, not every user needs to be a hacker, because again, oh my god, that would be terrible. So not everyone needs to be a computer genius. But just like almost everyone can drive a car, we are not all race car drivers. That would also be really bad. But we can get from point A to point B. Users need to be able to operate their vehicles, as it were. They need to be empowered to problem solve and be safe operators so that they can focus on their work and doing the best in their roles, and you can focus on yours. So what that means is setting up strong security programs. I'm a big fan of those policies, of having those restrictions and access controls, forced updates, and other centralized controls. Because this frees up the bandwidth of your users. They can do their jobs, and they don't have to think about things that are outside of their purview. Then, when an error appears, because we all know that inevitably it will, you can investigate, and you have a framework within which you can investigate because you know what things are in place there. So the best thing that you can possibly do, if you missed the talk that was in this room at 2, it was Arent. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. It begins with an H. He talked about how to design a security training program, and it was fantastic. Because what you need to do is be working across teams in your company to drive security awareness and training, but it also needs to start with just a little bit of tech literacy. Like, people don't know what they're doing, just help them know. Because that way, then when you get a user that identifies a potential problem and asks you, they aren't a pain because they're not being like, how do I change my font size? They're like, I got this really weird email, and I remember this thing about weird emails, and this looks like our domain, but not quite. I think it's misspelled. I don't know. Can you take a look at this? And you're like, oh my god, you are so helpful. Thank you. So, here are your action items. Yep. If you're worried about the actual education problem, you can send some emails. Email your schools, your districts, your politicians. Tell them about programs that will help them provide education to students that don't require them to have all of these like credentialed staff and everything. Code.org, Hacker High School, Cyber Patriot, they're really helpful. Medium level, go to a PTA meeting, even if you don't have a kid, they're actually available to everyone. Go to a school board meeting, raise hell, make people uncomfortable, it's good for them. And the large is volunteer to help teachers, like go into a school and run an after-school training. They'll almost definitely say yes, because schools don't have the budget for quality training, and all they want, like all the principal wants, is to not have to run a faculty meeting. They'll be like, yes, oh my god, thank you, yes, come in and tell us about passwords. Sponsor an after-school program or team. I ran a Cyber Patriot program at my high school, and it was so freaking fun. You just end up with a classroom of like 8 or 10 kids staying after school and being like, I want to learn how to hack a Gibson. And then you get to show them hackers. It's fun. I brought them to B-sides in San Francisco, and it was great, except the part where they got selfies with me with a drink. And I was like, please don't get me fired. But other than that, like, it was amazing. They learned how to pick locks, and they got really excited about computers, and they all wanted to build their own Linux computers. And it's the cutest thing. It will make you so happy. In the workplace problem, team up with your learning and development department if you've got one. Tell them what kind of skills you want your users to have. Their job is to know how to do good training. Give them a laundry list of skills. They'll probably ask you for a couple meetings where they can pick your mind in order to learn about what you're really looking for, and then they'll design a training and they'll deploy it. You just have to impart wisdom. Run simulations and exercises. I'm a huge fan of those like Fish Your Employee programs. I think they're great. So think about what else you can do to give those kinds of real world exercises, because that makes it more fun for your employees and it makes it more engaging. They're going to remember it better. Finally, go forth. The much maligned raising awareness is actually really valuable here, because this is something that just isn't really talked about much. The people that might want to do something about it don't necessarily know that they should be. So raising a ruckus can really go a long way. Volunteering and getting actively involved is great, but that's for people like me, the few, the proud, those who hate having a life. If you value your life, you don't have to do this. But again, it's really cute. The kids get excited about Linux. It's adorable. So consider it. Thank you so much for joining me. I often rant and or post pictures of my pets on Twitter. And I would love to answer some questions if anyone has questions. Yeah. So I think some really great places to start, like within your own home, is that Chrome has a ton of really great educational plugins for just things like practicing basic keyboarding, practicing things like that. Doing like Code Academy exercises with them can be a really fun way to learn together and press their thinking. And then from there, you can start in on playing more of the games, running the simulations of like, you know, well, what would you do if I changed the Wi-Fi password and you wanted to figure out how to get it? And maybe they'll land on social engineering, or maybe they'll start asking you more about, you know, well, how does Wi-Fi work? Why does the password work? How do I get into that? For the broader picture, I would definitely say, you know, talking to other parents and getting like a group of parents together that are concerned about this issue and want kids to be having a more robust technical education, getting that group together and bringing it to, you know, the school board, really pushing for that change. Now is also a great time to be doing that because we're heading into the summer. So there's opportunities to really push. You'd be amazed how many things change over the summer leading up to the next school year, as much as we like to pretend like, haha, we're all set for next year. Over the next 6 to 8 weeks, a lot of teachers are going to shit their pants as they get emails of like, guess what? It's changed. So this is a great time to push for things to change. And even if it's just like, hey, at the beginning of the school year, all students should spend 2 weeks in the computer lab, like learning basics. That's great. That would be great. That would be a huge difference from where we are right now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple reasons. One is that calculus looks really good on college applications. It's a really popular one. And if you aren't planning on being like a science or math or engineering major, I was really happy because I went through BC Calc in high school, and that meant I never had to take another math class again, because I passed my AP exam, and that was it. So a lot of students are into it for that reason, because it's going to get them out of a general education requirement in college. In California, that will help you pass. Students have to demonstrate a certain level of aptitude in like reading, writing, and math. Otherwise, they get put in remediation classes. I understand this is fairly common across most state university systems. I just happen to know California. And passing an AP exam in a math is one of the ways that you can demonstrate that skill level, so that's popular. And then also, although we're low on math teachers, we've got a good number of them. Again, the number of people that are doing computer science are much lower. Because, frankly, if you're good at computer science, why are you going to accept $35,000 a year to be a teacher and show up at work at 7 a.m.? I have not met many coders that are like, that sounds great. I'll see you there. Maybe even at 6:45. It's just not a thing. Yeah. So I've had a couple of thoughts. One of the things that I really want to try to work on as like a passion project that I just came up with a couple weeks ago is I think it would be really interesting to partner school districts with some of those like hacker boot camps that they're like, give us 10 weeks and we'll get you a job in Silicon Valley. Well, what if they trimmed their curriculum down a little bit, let's say made it 8 weeks, and they offered it free of charge to teachers who are willing to then become computer science teachers. So you have people, because I would have done that. I would have done that in a heartbeat. I already know pedagogy. I'm excellent at running a classroom, at designing lessons. I know all of that stuff. I guess if you shoved me in a paper bag and told me to get out of it, I could code my way out, but I wouldn't trust myself to really engage kids with that knowledge. And that's the biggest fear, is, again, because there's no certification to become a comp sci teacher. There's no way to know who's qualified, and there's no way to necessarily have teachers that are going to have that knowledge. So what if people that don't want to be professional developers, what if we offered them a fast track into spend your summer learning to code so that then next year you can go teach kids how to code? Like, I bet a lot of teachers would do that. They'd be so excited about that. There's a huge roadblock in implementing any sort of engineering education because we don't have people to teach it. Exactly. Yeah, because we're struggling enough to staff math and science classes that, like, if we can get STEM teachers, we're putting them in there because that's mandatory. So, you know, the likelihood that you're going to have a spare STEM teacher, really unlikely. Yeah. Surprisingly, no. I have submitted to a couple education conferences. So far, no takers. We'll see. I'm just going to keep submitting. Maybe I need to revise my pitch. But I'm working on it because I do think that it is really important. And I'm hoping that if I can actually, like, work with a couple districts and boot camps to get, like, a pilot program going, that then I'll have something really, really valuable to report at an education conference. So we'll see. All right. Thank you, guys. I have 3 minutes to run to resume review, and I'm going to do that.